Hello, this is Damien from AtHope, and I'm an axiological atheist. And today, I'm going to be talking with Karen. Hi, Karen. Could you go
Hi,
ahead
how
and
you doing?
could you go ahead and tell us about yourself and why I feel that you're interesting? And I do feel you're interesting, by the way.
Thank you. I've had a very eclectic career. I started out teaching French, got a PhD in education, worked for a union, was director of the Community College Association, and then I retired after 13 years as executive director of the Oregon State Bar.
Wonderful. You sound like you had a very productive and fulfilling life.
Yes, I have, and it's still going on.
Right on. And that's the part actually that interests me the most is the fact that what you're doing. I know you have a blog, and I would like you to go ahead and tell us about that. I feel like there's a bunch of beneficial things that you do. One of the things that I personally like that is probably going to be a more of an issue, I think, really in atheism, is that you focus on feminism.
Yes.
And I'm an anarcho-feminist in general. So I'm an anarchist in general. So already to me that means feminism. So
I love it.
Well, I mean, because my thinking is human freedom can't be limited to just like one gender. That's like crazy. Human freedom, if I'm for it, then I'm for human freedom. I mean, I don't have and if I'm for equality,
Yes.
I don't know how I could say, oh, no, but not them. That's why I talked to someone this morning. I said to them, he said, how should I treat religious people? And I said, like they're valuable people. I mean,
Absolutely.
in a sense,
I totally agree.
In a sense, is what you're doing, because just think, if the belief is something that we say doesn't matter, then why are we not able to treat them like humans? They're the ones that should be up the problem when someone has the wrong belief, to be able to be mean to us, because they feel they have a right. But we don't have that right. We know that beliefs don't matter. People do. So and that's why I think you do.
That's why a lot of people shy away from the moniker atheist. Because it does have negative connotations, and they like to be called humanists, I think, for the very reason you were talking about it. When I retired, or let me go back a little. My husband was kind of a lapsed Catholic when we got married 28 years ago.
Okay.
And we went to Lutheran churches. That's how I was raised. And the last church we went to was the Living Enrichment Center in Wilsonville. And it was affiliated with New Thought, and it was kind of all paths to God, and there's no doctrine or dogma or anything like that. Well,
could you go? Well, go on a second. I know what New Thought is. Could you explain that for other people? Because
it's kind of like Unitarian Universalists in a way. There's not a lot of doctrine or dogma. All paths to God. There were people there who were raised Jewish, Christian, probably some Muslims. I don't know. But they had a lot of different speakers. The Dalai Lama came, and it was a great community. They ran into some financial difficulties and they folded. And that was, a couple decades ago. And my husband and I never joined another church. I was an atheist by then, and never really thought of joining any atheist community. It was like, I'm just going to sleep in on Sundays. We have a 26-year-old son, and we raised him secular. I did try to, I thought it would be important if you ever went into English literature to know something about the Bible. So I would start out, and I'd get this children's Bible, and I would start out with Adam and Eve. And then, of course, my commentary was, of course, this is just a myth, and,
right.
It's allegory, and the fact that the woman isn't treated equal, etc. Well, I found that my commentary was about 10 times longer than the verse in the Bible, so I did that. But we never sought out a community. We did a lot of other stuff. And then in 2014, when the United States Supreme Court, Burwell v. Hobby Lobby, where they said this craft store, because of its religious views, and it is opposed to certain forms of birth control, like the morning after pill, etc., it doesn't have to provide them under Obamacare. And I was just incensed about that. I thought, my goodness, I grew up before abortion was legal. I grew up when birth control was hard to get. And young women shouldn't have to go through that again. Why are we still fighting this issue 50 years later? And I was having lunch with a friend of mine who's an author, and she said, you should write a book. And I said, well, the only thing I can get, energized about or passionate about is atheism.
Yeah.
And so that prompted me to write the book. Fortunately, I got to meet Dr. Peter Boghossian real early on because he's at Portland State professor, and he's written the manual for creating atheists, and his work.
Yeah, I know. I'm very well aware of who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, Atheos, etc., and really worked closely with me and helped me get endorsements and a publisher and all of that. But you mentioned the word feminism, which is real interesting. I hired a marketing guy.
Yeah.
Who said, you have to have a blog, you have to do this, you have to do that. So I got involved in all of that, and the first name he came up with was Godless Grandmother. And I said, let's not emphasize that I'm a grandmother, okay? And so we came up with Faithless Feminist, and my blog is faithlessfeminist.com. And I was really surprised at the pushback I got on that word feminism.
You must not have been on Facebook very much.
No, and I wasn't really attuned to that. I was working, I was raising a kid, I was involved in political stuff, but not that end of it. And yes, I was very surprised.
I agree with you. I was surprised too, because to me it's a given. So I didn't understand. Because to me, like I said, if you say we're equal, I don't even understand. I mean, the concept of someone else being unequal just for a gender does not even make sense to me. From my mind, even for a kid, I mean, I've been a feminist my whole life. It's not like I became atheist and decided to be a feminist because I think it's a cool thing. No, I watched my dad, beat the crap out of my mom, wanted to kill him myself. He was also harming us, so he was another reason to want to hurt him. But having to watch that also was as much almost as being hurt, to see someone victimized and helpless. I can't do anything. So, I mean, I don't think there's ever a time in the sense that I wasn't, feminist. Once I got into college, though, I got into feminist therapy and started reading a lot about that, caring about that stuff. But anyways, so what does it relate to about you, though? That interests me.
Well, I think, I have certain experiences. The one kind of I remember the most was I applied for a scholarship when I was in college to go to grad school in Dartmouth. And the only woman on the committee said, why should we give it to you? Just get married and have kids. And that was, 1972. You kind of think that was really the big feminist movement with Gloria Steinem and everybody. And the woman, how we oppress ourselves. And, I suppose you're a psychologist. You can analyze her own repression coming out in that comment. I don't know. But I've always competed with men. Every job I've had, there's been men who have been in the top tier too. And I've had other things happen, but I was just surprised about coming from both ends, coming from men and coming from women.
Yeah.
I was on an atheist group. It's called No Gods, No Masters, Atheist Feminist or something like that. And Shanna Babyloni and I had done a post about we need more secular men, and just talked about that. And they were so mocking of including men in the process. And I said,
oh yeah, I've had them do it to me. Yes.
Women wouldn't have gotten the vote if men wouldn't have supported them. I mean, we need to do this together, just like all the things you've been saying about equality. We're in this together, folks.
We're all human. Well, but that's why I realized when I grounded my morality now is actually I realized we have to bring it to the simplest presupposition of what a human is, in a sense. Like, what does it make to be human? What's the simplest way? We are beings of dignity. In other words, that we can feel pain. So when you say respect my rights, you're saying don't violate my dignity, is what you're really saying. My self-ownership rights, in a sense. So I started thinking, then really we need to care about dignity. And I started realizing, man, I need to see people as fellow dignity beings. When I do that, man, how could I not respect them? In other words, I've categorized it to where the only thing it can be is respected. Mentally, I realize, but that's actually true because we're social beings. We need each other. You don't think that? You don't need to be a psychologist. Put someone in solitary confinement. How long until they turn insane, even if they were normal?
Yes.
it's 100 out of 100. It's just or relatively, because somebody could make it. But in general, if you completely isolate somebody completely, eventually they are going to go crazy because. And I was thinking about this too. Why do they go crazy? And I was thinking it's even healthy people. And I was thinking, I wonder if we need to hear ourselves talk. In other words, we create the social mentally because I see mental illness is imbalances trying to get balance. In other words, sickle cell anemia saves lives in a sense because you don't get malaria, right? So it has a evolutionary benefit in a sense. Not that everything has to. Like our blood is red, it could be blue, green, clear. There's no relevance. It's just an accident. But there are things that are not accidents. Like I said, we're talking about specific things have specific values. And so once I see humans as having value, and I stop seeing the package. Now this brings me to your point here. I go to feminist groups, and like right now you're looking at me. Everyone assumes I am a cis male, but I'm not. I'm an intersex, genderqueer male. So I actually don't even relate to 100% to men. So when they're talking to me, and they don't realize they almost could classify me as transgender in their eyes. So, but even though I'm not trying to dress something different, because I actually feel fine. I just think different. Yeah. And actually, biologically, am not totally male. It's probably not. It's probably like, I say, I don't know, but it's probably like, say, 10% not male towards leaning into intersex. It's not like I'm some, but I don't think there's anything wrong with someone if they're in the middle. Someone's totally intersex. Yeah. People are born that way,
Well, I was reading the other day that some Native American tribes had 5 words for gender.
Yes.
Had 5 classifications for gender, and I thought it was really fascinating. Yeah, I think it's a new thing. It's not a new thing.
Well, even Babylon talked about transgender, intersex. They talked about cross-dressing, homosexuality.
Oh, hermaphrodites.
Yes, they did. Yes.
This is Fellini's movie? Yeah.
Well, so to me, a hermaphrodite is an intersex person that's in the middle, in a sense. What you're saying is, you're saying there was male, or it's female, hermaphrodite, male. And everything in between that is, to me, what I would call a intersex version of the thing that it's leading to.
But you're right, they knew about it a long time ago.
Yeah, 5,000 years ago, but who's counting, right? Oh, who's counting? Like, do you know, I know that feminism matters to me. Do you know that I know the oldest document for feminism? Or women's rights? 4,000 years ago.
What?
4,000 years ago. Was
it the woman in Babylon, the daughter of the ruler? She was a really good writer. Her name starts with an E, and I could never pronounce it.
Well, I know it's a treaty, or I believe, if I remember right, it's a treaty between northern Iraq, or maybe Babylon, and Turkey. Or they maybe it's the Hittite. No, not the Hittite. It's actually about 2000. So no, but anyways, it has to do with the treaty. They're basically saying it wasn't written for females' rights. When it was written, it was like, you own this land. We're not going to come to your place. They don't come to my place. By the way, don't take my slaves. I won't take yours. By the way, women have rights, and then we shouldn't steal horses. And it's saying, but I'm saying in a sense, it was like it was afterthought, but it still shows 4,000 years ago they wanted to write down that women have rights. And I always think as a psychologist, the only reason you'd write it down is because someone was challenging it.
Absolutely.
But the only reason you'd also write it down is it used to be the norm, in a sense, or you want it to be the new norm. Either one. So either they were pushing women's rights at 4,000 years ago, which I don't think, because I know more history in general, but or they were trying to get something that was continuous from before. Either way, to me, we have proof that it's women's rights being needed or being thought of as valuable. It has nothing new at all.
Well, I think it's interesting. One of the slide presentations I do when I do a book signing is called From Goddess to God, Elimination of the Female Divine. And you think it probably took, Karen Armstrong says it probably took 600 years for monotheism to really develop with the Israelites. And a lot of that was against the male god Baal, but a lot of it was against the female goddess Shera. and putting it down. And so when you see the counterpoint in the records that survive about putting something down, you know that it had a place.
Oh, just like you said, they go, oh, well, no, there was Asher poles were in the temple. Yeah, you know why there were poles? Let me explain some to you. Because they thought that the goddess was residing in trees.
Exactly.
So the reason they put wooden poles was because it was a representation of the outside in the inside of the goddess. So and it was right there at the temple, right in the front. Yes,
Oh, sure. And there's mentions in the Bible of Manasseh putting cult objects in the temple.
Oh,
and,
yes.
There's a piece in Jeremiah where the women are wailing at the temple and basically saying things are going really crappy. And when we baked cakes for the Queen of Heaven, meaning the female deity, we did really well. We're going to go back. So even in what's been edited 4 or 5 times, you still find reference to this female.
Oh, definitely. I read a whole book that talks about the prehistory and from prehistory to the cultivation of the Jewish mythology. Mm-hmm. It's archaeological, and it talked about finding all kinds. They said what the interesting thing is, it seems that there was a difference between temple and people's lives. In other words, in Jerusalem, let's say at the temple at the same time, in other words, the temple people were being religious and following closer to what the Bible says, but they're all the elites.
Absolutely.
So they're regular. Yeah. So in a sense, the scribes are all the elites. They're not really. So when they say like our God is only a male or whatever, or only does. Yeah, that's not how the rest of the people were. First off, some people couldn't read, so that was a problem right there. They wouldn't even know if they were shown the Bible or the actually scrolls at the time, but would have meant almost nothing. But not everyone wasn't illiterate. The other problem is that people had to travel. It's not like there was the internet, so if you didn't have a reason to travel, you may do a pilgrimage once a year, twice a year, whatever, but obviously you're not going to go like every weekend. You're not going to go 300 miles or something, or 100 miles or 50 miles. People nowadays, sometimes, like some places in the United States, like they don't leave 10 miles radius of their whole life. That's possible. So it's not outlandish to think back then, when they didn't even have, motors and may not have been able to afford animals. And, walking is not fun. And not to mention, sometimes can be dangerous.
Well, I was in the British Museum a couple of years ago, and I had read about these small clay figurines that people kept in their house. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right. The temple was for the elite and the priests, and all of those things went on. But in the house, they would have a little hearth, yes, and they would have maybe a candle or spice or something, or incense or something like that. And they had these little figurines, and they're only about 2 inches tall. Yes. When I saw them in the museum, I was going, they're so small, but they're mostly female. Yeah. So they had their own kind of private worship, if you will.
Oh, I totally agree. Yes.
Those female figurines lasted way, way, way a long time.
Well, and then later they started bringing those, or I don't know if it's consistent, but certainly it seems interesting, those figurines. Then later you see them where they're bringing all these figurines, right, to the temples and almost like they're little worshipers, little like representations of you or something, which is a weird thought. But then I can see it's almost like the candles, lighting candles. It's like a little prayer worship. Yeah. So it's a ritual. Definitely a ritual. I'm just saying that. So, but I was thinking maybe it started in the house, and I was thinking I could see where it would be a good tactic if I wanted to manipulate people to stop being pagan. Tell them, because I can't get the pagan things out of their house. But I have a nice idea. Bring all your pagan, goddesses and put them around here. They'll be your little offerings. They'll, and now they're no longer at the house. See, I've just removed the religion from you, innocent. Right. I can see this tactically. you could, and I think that a lot of them thought that way. Just like now, there's apologetics now. It's like, do you think it was that different back then? There's
exactly. But they found those clay figurines in archaeological excavations from the northern and the southern kingdom. So people kind of, they cling to certain things. That's why it takes so long. I think if you look at the Catholic Church and what happened to the Virgin Mary, who got increasingly venerated, then she was a virgin afterwards she was, went to heaven, the ascension, and all of those things, even into the 20th century, elevated her because there was this kind of need for some sort of female representation. And that's the Virgin Mary really took the place of that. And then you have Martin Luther come along, and obviously, against the indulgences of the church and all the abuses of the church, etc. But he was a real misogynist. He and Calvin, they eliminated, we're not going to venerate the Virgin Mary. But he also said things like, well, if women die in childbirth, no big deal, because their job was to have children. And of course, when I was growing up a Lutheran, we never heard of that. We never heard about his anti-Semitism and his treatise on Jews and their lies, or you never heard the negative stuff. It was all kind of culled out. But you kind of say as a woman, well, at least the Catholic Church had the Virgin Mary. They had female saints. They had some representation of females, not a lot, but something. And Protestantism had none. Absolutely none. Totally eliminated the feminine.
Yeah, well, it's so crazy because to me, like I tell people before that now that I've studied, I take religion all the way back to before it was even superstition. I mean, I go back to in my book, I start at a million years and go down from there. Archaeologically, what we actually know, what are the facts, what are the things we've found. Anyways, but what that helps me understand is, man, way at the beginning, it's female. That's why I said it is the most ludicrous proposition after I understand the evidence to think there's a male God. That proposition to me is just ludicrous because if there was, why would he let? Because at least it's like, yeah, it's like 250,000 years to 800,000 years ago. It's hard to tell because of the dirt, so they don't know exactly. But somewhere, it's probably closer to, they say like 300,000 or 350. 300,000 years ago, there's a figurine that looks like a female.
Oh, well, and most of that comes from the Paleolithic that they found in the caves like Lascaux, and most of those representations are females. What's interesting is where they're found.
Yes.
If you look at a cave like Lascaux, in the back, the shaman went with the men and the boys to teach them about the hunt. They drew the pictures, and they painted over and over and over the same picture. That was part of their ritual. But those figurines are found near the hearth, the front of the cave, where the fires were, where the women were. There was even one Cro-Magnon site where they hypothesized, and this is a guess, of course, but maybe it was a birthing center, where the women went to have birth, and there were a lot of these figurines. But they're definitely in the living part of the cave. They're not in the back of the cave. And so that is very telling. But imagine what it was like for early human beings to see, and they learned a lot more about astrology than we think. They understood the cycles of the moon, and then they see these women having monthly cycles. And, it's gotta be, if you're a guy, you're going, wow, look at the moon's going around. She has her period every month. That's cool. And so you have this association with nature. You have this association with cycles. And there was a much closer relationship with the earth, with the worship of a female deity than there was with a male.
Yeah, I agree. I know this. I know the first. I know a lot about this stuff because I said this is all about the archaeological prehistory. I have done 3 years of in-depth research into. But anyways, what's the first religion was definitely somehow connected to female worship or at least reverence of some kind. Yes, I mean, nature. Yeah, it's probably goddess at 12,000. It's probably goddess worship by that point. Certainly by somewhere by 10 to 11, some point it becomes goddess worship. Now, goddess worship is before gods. There was no gods, no male gods. There's spirits, in a sense, animals, and it looks like maybe females are somehow venerated. I don't know what that means. I don't know what exactly. At some point, it becomes a female goddess. Definitely. There's certainly
downhill after agriculture.
Well, no. Well, agriculture starts at 11, and starts in Turkey, and then goes out from Turkey over to Europe and over to Greece, but the first biggest city, 10,000 people in Catalhook and central Turkey, That's about anywhere from 8,000, 9,000 to about, I think, 6 or 7. But they had no like controlled government. It's almost a utilitarian. They didn't have locks. It was 10,000 people. All their houses touched. I mean, and they're definitely a feminist goddess stuff everywhere, including bulls and stuff, which I think all has to do with the goddess. Really is. The bull has to do with the horns. Horns have to do with grabbing the moon. The moon has to do with the cycles and all that. Anyways, there's a whole bunch of. It's like cornucopia to me is the horn from a bull, and it's just a representation. I don't think it had anything to do with the phallus. I think it has to do with plenty, or it has to do with also because like the thing we don't understand is the kind of even bulls they had back then, the aurochs and what that is not the same animal. They were bigger and they were way more aggressive, and their horns also didn't go out; they went more forward or more up, which you see some in Africa still do. They kind of do that.
Well, you've obviously read Maria Gimbutas.
About the bull and the goddess or whatever.
Oh yeah, she did a lot of the excavation in Çatalhöyük.
Yep.
And
yeah, I probably don't pronounce stuff right, but whatever.
Oh, I don't think I do either. James Millard.
Well, you sounded like you did it better than me, but.
Well, there is also a lot of evidence in Crete.
Yeah.
Where there's this lack of fortification, and it's a much more peaceful civilization, and the goddess worship lasted probably the longest in that civilization.
I agree.
And there's frescoes on the wall of a woman on a throne, etc.
Yep.
So I kind of say it was all downhill after agriculture, because once private property came along and you had ownership, you have to defend. You have to defend your property.
Well, yeah. Well, the oldest, I think it's 9,000 is the oldest wall near Jericho where they were. But it wasn't. But it wasn't universal. Like most of Turkey didn't have walls in it.
Oh no.
So it's really what I see is the fall of women. It's 7,000. There's graves in this place. I can't remember where it's at now, but they have like 500. It's 1,000. I can't remember now. I'm not very super good at details. I have to look at them again. It's been a long time. I looked at it, but anyways, it's so much information I know. It's hard for me to. I'm a big picture person, not detailed. Anyway, but if you look at the thing, you can see because it's continuous burial for like a long, long time.
Yes.
So and they have a burial practice, so it's very good. They didn't move. Nobody came in and invaded them. I can't remember this area. No, can't remember. It's like somewhere in Europe, but I can't remember now. But anyways, because they said it's a great thing to test and watch how women lost value. You can see it in the graves. So it starts off the beginning at 7,000, pretty much the same. They're both, relative, a little bit different, but both same. I can't remember exactly, but like let's say you had a little amulet and a thing, and they had a amulet and a thing. And all of a sudden they have an amulet, you don't, but you have some little toy or something. Now you're already devalued. This is like, I can't remember, this is halfway in. You already see, boom, starting, and then you see no more toys at all. Just the male gets an amulet. And anyways, I can't remember the whole thing, but the grave goods you can totally see that there's a change, and so by somewhere talking about 5,000, something close to that is when women were all of a sudden it's totally different. You can see the graves. I mean, they're now seeing them as something different, and obviously males more value. And what's interesting is that 5,200 years ago is about the time of the pharaohs, the first pharaoh. And he starts it with a structure of hierarchy, an unequal hierarchy. King God at top, then the priests, and then the people help the priests, and then the military, and then the royals or whatever, and then the slaves, and then after that there's actually, if you're below a slave, your life is dead. But anyways, but I mean there was people below them, and they were didn't care if they died. But anyway, so the point is that the hierarchy happens at that point. So funny, not funny, but I mean sad. Right within 100 years, that's when you see all the places in Mesopotamia start popping up with hierarchies and almost the same structure, almost exactly as Egypt. Yes.
Well, and you see that in the Babylonian myths, whether it's Enuma Elish or Gilgamesh from about 2,500, 2000 BC.
Yep.
And you see this pantheon of male and female gods, and then what you have is Marduk, who's going to his bros and say, hey, if you make me head dog, I'll get rid of Tiamat, which is the female goddess, the Leviathan in the Bible, the sea monster, etc. And you can't say that the Israelites weren't influenced by that because they were in exile in Babylon.
Oh, they absolutely were.
For 4 decades.
Well,
and that is really where this monotheism kind of solidified. We lost. They didn't. They have one God. Therefore, we should have one God. Yeah. And from the return from the exile forward, they were mostly monotheistic. But there were other cultures, like you said, the Egyptian, etc., elevating the male. Although Egypt had, had
the oldest,
pharaohs who were female, not a lot, but
the oldest. Well, I have a whole thing where there's a whole bunch of females actually that ruled. Everything before 1,000, really. People in Africa, in Iraq, in Iran, in Turkey, in Egypt, in Israel, Syria. They're all I can't remember all of them, but there's a whole bunch. It starts. It's like 4,400 or something, or 4,300 years ago or something, or maybe I don't know, but something like that. That's the oldest documented that I know of. Could be. Some people know some I don't know, but that I know of the oldest ruling female. Mm-hmm. So, but that's still, and it happened in I can't remember if it was in Egypt or it was in I think it's in Iraq. I think it was in Iraq, but it could have been Egypt. I don't know, but it was one of those. Anyways, but it's a long time ago, and I agree. What's interesting about Egypt, they actually by their religious law almost established that the king had to be male and all would have to come from the next king from a male heir. But what's interesting is they didn't seem to have a problem with transgender or I would say cross-dressing at least, because like you said, they allowed that I know one of the I think the pharaoh's wives after he died or something like that to take over, and as long as she wore a fake beard, it was fine. She was
good. Yeah.
She's good. You're a man. I mean, so that tells you that their idea of gender must have been way more fluid than we think. They're like, oh, that's a man. Well, how do you know it's a man? It has a beard. Well, that's not a real beard.
That is all a good reason why I decided to focus on women. And the book I wrote, Women Beyond Belief, Discovering Life Without Religion, is a set of essays of 22 women who tell their stories from leaving religion. Because it's women, just as you've been outlining, who have been most oppressed by religion.
Oh, definitely.
And if you do look at it historically, like you and I have, you can see the before, you can see what's happened, and you can see the result of that. All of a sudden, this goddess who was in tune with nature and the cycles were there, and you transformed into, she's dirty, she's unclean, she has to go in a red tent, she can't be allowed in the temple, and you have a complete flip with the memes of the goddess and the memes of the male deity. And the rising ascendancy of men. But
there's some I know too, because I know a lot. I distinctly looked at sexism as a historical thing, or prehistory actually, and history. But there's a very interesting thing to me. What happens is the goddess, before the goddess gets taken over by the man, they do something else to her first that to me has been detrimental to this day.
Oh, what's that?
They split the goddess. They made a mother and they made a whore. In a sense, they made sexual desire and none. So your mother, you cannot be sexual, and a non-mother is a sexual being, whether or not she almost wants to be, in a sense.
Interesting. Well, clearly,
so they made because they made. What I'm saying is they made two goddesses. There's a point where there was one kind of a goddess, and then they made two goddesses. One was like the goddess you use for certain things, of protecting whatever and nurturing, and the other one was war in a sense, or hurting your enemies, or that kind of protecting by hurting. And so they split, like you said, negative. Now they made the woman is the younger one is sexual, whether she likes it or not, which is a bad thing because some people like to choose when they're sexual or not. You know what I'm saying? I'm joking. No, I'm trying not to be. But anyway, so she has to be sexual. Because she is that. Then they make it because they usually have her naked and her legs open, where her vaginal is like completely exposed. So it's not like a position that would be a strong, I own my sexuality or something. I see it more almost as a victim, or like that. So because I think to me, I mean, I'm just reading into what I see in the pictures, but I'm an artist. It seems to me they're trying to convey that this one has to be available all the time for sex, when I know that that means rape, right? I mean, in a sense, I mean, no, I don't know any woman that is just available for every whole world, in a sense. So it tells me that they're probably implying, but then again, we know sex and the goddess is a normal thing. Women would be prostitutes, in a sense, for the goddess later on. But I mean, I could see where that idea came from. Like the core of what started this nonsense that later became. In other words, once you split and you say that woman has to be sexual, and this other one has to not. See, they did that. That a mother has to not be sexual, and a non-mother, in a sense, has to be. I just feel it's completely toxic. I mean, there's no way out of that. So then, not only that, no woman. Let's just say that you're a perfect woman. How can you do that? You have to be two people. I mean, how can you physically do it? It's impossible. And to me, so the male dogs don't do that. Everything is them. They're their own. They can. In fact, they have every quality in the world. They're like spiderweb qualities. I mean, they have qualities. In fact, the more you talk, the more qualities they get. But women, they broke them apart. And I found that as a destruction to women, even to this day, because we do that to this day. There's mothers. We go, oh, she's a mother. Oh, she's single. Just those words. We're already putting negative value. We're in a sense, it's a microaggression because we mean something by it, right? The difference, if I say she's a mother, or if I say she's single, see, your mind already puts a value, that there's a value difference. But couldn't this single person be a mother? Yeah, why? I haven't told her she's not a mother. But you assume. Single means no children. But that's actually an invalid thing. We know this. But I'm just saying, but because there's this like architecture that you can't get out of, and you don't even know why, and no one even knows why, because it goes back so far. Even when it was done, now we'd be like, that doesn't make sense. So no one's going to explain it to you if they did know. Because, I mean, tell me a good reason why you'd break women in half. I mean, their personality.
Well, I think a lot of that, I kind of said it's all downhill from agriculture. But once you come up with a concept of private property,
yeah,
and if the male's going to own the property, they want to pass it to the son.
Yeah.
So as you see this patriarchy develop, then it's important for him that he knows it's his son.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
That's where you come up with, I have to marry a virgin.
I agree.
And she can't commit adultery. I can have 200 wives like Solomon, but she can't, because I want to pass this on to my lineage. And obviously by that time they'd long figured out, the male's role in reproduction. Maybe not 20,000 years ago, but certainly by then. So you have this chaste woman who is going to be married and essentially, in a way, like you said, stay chaste, being only with her husband. But then you have, the denigration of sex per se.
Which would be the other goddess that you saw as just negative. Because remember, the sex and the violence. Because she was seen, in a sense, as the warrior, usually. Because she doesn't have kids to worry about, in a sense. I mean, if you put it because they personified a lot more than we do. They didn't have like these gods in space, They had them, a lot more in the real world, like spirits they were talking to or whatever.
Well, and there was a sacred rite called Hieros Gamos, with a sacred marriage where the king and the goddess would come together.
Yes.
So clearly, as part of their ritual, was this sex.
Yes.
With the king and the goddess.
Yes.
So that is another thing that if you're trying to go just to the god, you want to put it down, and that's a way of putting it down, is making that the goddess, the female, lesser, etc. What's amazing to me is how long that has lasted and how pervasive that is today in many, many areas of the world. I mean, it is astounding to me that somebody can be a brilliant doctor, woman in Saudi Arabia, and can't drive a car. And these women are intelligent.
Yeah.
But there's this whole political force and the institution, if you will, of the church and the imam and all of that keeps it done today in 2016. And there's still, ritual genital mutilation occurring. So it's really pervasive. And that's why I think it's important to reach women. Sonia Johnson, who was a Mormon during the Equal Rights Amendment, and questioned why the Mormon Church was against the Equal Rights Amendment and eventually got excommunicated, said, if women leave the church, religion is over. And so to me, I want to focus on giving women models of leaving religion. I'm also working on a second book with a lot of established women atheist authors, Valerie Trico, where you're from,
right,
Abby
I know her.
Beecher, Candace Gorham, etc., that are going to outline all the different reasons that women have been subjugated through religion. Take a look at this. I mean, read this. And that's going to be a set of more persuasive essays versus my first book, which is more personal essays. But there's a lot of focus in the new atheism by men authors, by male authors. I did a study of the 100 best-selling books on atheism, and at the time I did it, 6 of them were women. So I want to be out there and saying, you know, women in particular need to take a look at the subjugation they have undergone because of religion. And if you trace it back historically like you've done, you can see where it started, see what happened in other cultures. This is a mythology just like all the other cultures.
It completely is.
People let people know about that and get the word out, if you will. And if we do it in the United States, like Europe, I think eventually that will be more successful in reaching those parts of the world that are incredibly oppressed. And I have an ex-Muslim writing. I have Aruna Path, who grew up in India. And when she was a young girl, she saw a neighbor young girl being immolated. They lit her on fire and killed her because she dishonored the family. And obviously nobody called the police.
It's so odd to me. Killing your child dishonors your family more than whatever you think that person has done.
Yeah.
You just murdered someone, your own family. How can that be more horrid than honor?
And we've had that in the United States too. Somebody's killed or was accused of trying to kill their daughter because she had dishonored the family.
Yeah.
So we have a long ways to go, but to me it's step by step, and I really encourage more women to speak out and join the really activist men. I mean, if you go on YouTube, most of the debates about religion and atheism are men. We need to get more women active because there's so much more material there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many more things I as a woman can bring to bear to talk against religion than a man can.
Well, so I don't even think that it matters if there was. Women need to be in because we're all equal. I mean,
Absolutely.
To me, I'm just saying, I know, like I said, you have to remember, like I said, I come from my feminism, you know, from watching my personal life and then from my anarchism. I believe everyone is valuable. Everybody. People in Africa, me, all same. We're all the same. These are in India, female, transgender, gay, straight. It's all the same. It's just people. We all matter. I care about everybody. So
one of the things I think is important, and I often tell this story, I was in 9th grade and I learned about evolution, and there was no creationism, etc. at that time. And I was fascinated by it. I did a paper on early man and, you know, Homo erectus and Australopithecus and all of that. But I never saw a woman scientist. I never saw a woman science teacher. And there always are pioneers. There's always the woman who discovered dark matter, who just passed away. Certainly a pioneer, the first this, the first that, the first that. But for most people, they need to see something. I need to see a woman police officer so I can imagine myself a woman police officer. So as more women atheists join the fold and speak out, I think it will be easier for other women to join the fold and speak out.
Yeah,
so that's really my goal for the rest of my life.
Yeah, but I always tell people, I don't want anyone to feel obligated to do something that's not them. So be authentic. If you don't believe in God, but you don't feel that you can go out and talk, don't. You don't need to. But this is what they can do. See, they're not unaccountable to me. They're still responsible. Then they need to support us. They need to buy our books, share our blogs, do our posts, talk about our stuff. If you're not going to do it, which I don't say you have to, then I would feel, if I was you, then your obligation should be then to support the ones that do. I mean,
yeah, but I do think, as in the example I gave, you are more likely to step forward if that is your inclination.
True.
If you see other women step forward.
Well, I'm not disacknowledging. We definitely, and I do. I have 35 videos that most of them were personal interviews of female atheists, because I wanted to hear from females, from gays. I want to hear from people from other countries, because other religions. I care about really. I need to know all of it. I want to help all people. I'm not trying, like I feel as I don't focus on Christianity. Yeah, that's not the only problem in the world. If that was gone, no more Christianity at all, I still have to fight religion. If no Islam was gone, I would still have to fight religion. It's just, because the problem is this false belief that dehumanizes us. That's the biggest, like I was talking about, what happened to females. I feel that they were like dehumanized. And then it happened, dehumanized, it say, like you said, I agree with the timing. And you may be correct at the thing. I think it's not agriculture. You're right about time, but see, how I would say is animal husbandry is what did it, not agriculture. Because when I think of agriculture, I think of plants and stuff. But actually, it's the animals. Once they started, you could see it when they started keeping us about, I think it's 10,000 or something, the first like pigs and I can't remember the animals, but whatever. But anyways, they started keeping them. And I know that they're giving birth. And see, before all the animals were running out, like I know when they did Göbekli Tepe, that one's the oldest temple in the world in Turkey, southern Turkey or southeastern Turkey, they would actually go after the aurochs or whatever, but they didn't raise them. They would go after them wild. In fact, they would.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So I'm saying once they started keeping pens in a sense or something. Somehow they were keeping.
Well, it's ownership.
Yeah,
Whether
exactly.
it's ownership of the land that you're raising the plant on, or it's animal husbandry.
Yeah.
You want to keep the if you got the cow, then you want to keep the calves.
Yeah.
So it's this ownership.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely ownership. I was just saying. I rethought about what you said, and I was thinking, oh, I know why didn't click, because you were saying I was thinking animals. You were saying to me plants. So I was like, well, yeah, it is about the same time. It's about 1,000 years different, but it's about the same time. Yeah, but I was sitting, your thing is still valid in a sense. I was confused because I was thinking about the cause, like the animal husbandry, not the but you're right about it.
Slowly, it's kind of interesting. I told you I did a doctoral degree, and my dissertation was on cultural reproduction.
Cool.
I did an analysis of the French school system and how culturally things, economic strata continue, even though you've acknowledged that you shouldn't break people up into their economic groups. But your culture, what you accept as language, what you accept as dress, how you relate to people was there inherently, and they weren't aware of it. And I think it's kind of funny, 40 years later here, I'm talking about how does culture reproduce itself and how pervasive it is and how long it takes to change culture. And how we're not even aware of some of the things we do. I gave a presentation in Seattle a few weeks ago, and, I said, try to go a whole day without saying something that's related to religion. Whether it's, oh my God, or Jesus Christ, or you can't do it. And the metaphors we have, we have metaphors, he's worth his weight in salt from the Roman armies.
Right.
So you got to unpack that all. And to me, it's fascinating. I'm reading a book called The Measure of Woman by Carol Tarvis. And it talks about this difference between, you might find that interesting because it talks about the difference in genders and how they got established and all the underpinnings of all of that through time. And it's very interesting.
Well, that brings a good point. Someone asked me a question. I hear people fighting on atheism over it, the gender issue. I've obviously, because my gender is not the standard, and I looked into it heavily. before. But anyways, once I became an atheist, especially. But anyways, so there's a thing that people say that I feel like on the far left, they're saying gender is a completely 100% a social construct. And then I feel on the right, they're saying it's only biology in a sense. The ones that are, okay, you're both wrong. It's both. We are constantly affected and updating. In fact, our brain is just constantly processing the outside environment. We know because subconsciously we pick up more than we actually think about. And we're affected all the time. We're like emotional beings waiting to be affected. We're like waiting for it. Like feelers are out. But I see that as an evolutionary thing because that means we're that aware of our environment subconsciously. That means you and me are talking, but if someone with an axe started walking up through the door, even though I'm distracted, I would immediately, pick that up in a sense because we're taught to think a certain way evolutionarily. So we're not like some special thing that all of a sudden we've done this. No, sorry. Which is like another thing too. We don't realize that the reason why that we're such social beings and that we have all these different issues and why, like you said, the real sad thing in science is to have hatred towards women when, like that one scientist showed, 50,000 years ago when we basically became humans, our brains and stuff, we also feminized. That's one of the things difference that we were. Our biology. All humans are feminized compared to Neanderthals. They were more masculine in their facial features, more masculine in their body structure, more masculine hair-wise, muscle-wise. We're feminine, all of us.
Oh, yeah, there's less differentiation.
Yeah.
I kind of explain gender as a continuum.
Yes, it is. I agree with that, yes.
You have extremes, and then you have all in the middle, and some of that is, it's chromosomal, some of it's, hormonal, some of it's, whatever. And I think eventually science-wise we'll kind of get to the bottom of it. But one of the things I really appreciate today is that there's more talk about transgender.
Oh,
so I saw this news about this little, this young, boy, probably 9 or 10 who wanted to join the Cub Scouts because he's transgender male, and they wouldn't let him in. But you never would have heard that 50 years ago. So at least we're talking about it, and at least we're taking a look at it. And, more power to his parents to be able to recognize that so early on and accept it and love that child. The more we see of that in the news, hopefully that will change people's opinion because that person is the way they are because that's the way they are.
I totally agree. And that's why I talk about my stuff, my gender all the time. And people tell me, well, you're an atheist, don't talk about it. I'm like, okay, you're confused. I'm a human. I happen to not believe in gods. I don't run my life for the one thing to not believe in gods. I run my life with everything else that involves my humanity, which is I'm more of a humanist. As far as how I live my life, I don't live my life in a sense atheist. I am
I had a really good friend who was gay.
Yeah.
And I don't know that my brother when he moved here, had ever met somebody who was gay. And, I might have heard him say things in the past were kind of negative. The minute he met Craig and really liked Craig, I never heard something anti-homosexual come out of his mouth. Because now he could see a model, he could see a person, and if he said something that was against gays, he was saying something against Craig. So I think it's really important that you do speak out, and so that people can say, well, they're probably not going to say yada, 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 but Damien. Yeah. They're going to say, oh, Damien, therefore,
well,
I'm not going to say anything about that.
Well, and the good thing is I think that I'm a pretty positive, example. I'm not a negative example, even like when people call me names. When I told people that I was intersex, even this recently, like about a month ago, less than that, 2 weeks ago, I wrote that, because I tell people all the time, and someone wrote some nonsense on there, was just, and it's fake, whatever, and I go, yeah, okay, it's fake, okay, here's the science. Actually, I was informed from a doctor, I didn't even know. The doctor told me, oh, by the way, don't you know this? In a sense, so it actually, when I found out, it caused me a lot of internal shame and stuff because I wasn't normal, and I realized that my life, my mom, because I went and talked to her and she knew. Because they were Christian, they were hiding it, but they always kind of devalued and they didn't give me respect. And now I knew why. I thought, why was I never treated like the firstborn son? I was acting like I wasn't even there. Well, they never let me be the firstborn son because them, I was an abomination. I wasn't the firstborn son. I was some kind of like mistake or something. And so, but I didn't even know, but they always treated me like that, and abused me. But then I found out, but it was the worst part wasn't even the abuse is bad, but it was the fact they never even told me. All my life I felt different. I didn't understand. I'm like, I'm not gay because I don't like guys, but I don't feel normal. I don't, at least the way everyone else seems to do.
Society's norms.
Well, that's what I mean by, I meant, like, trying to, in other words, what I'm saying is, we take ourselves and we look at other people in the sense that we can, like, relate to ourselves. Is that me? How much is that me? If I were to hang up with, a bunch of monkeys, eventually I might feel like that's me, even though it's not. But in general, we were pretty aware when people are not like us. And I felt just different. Like, they would don't you like sports? I'm like, no. Like, well, football. Yeah, running after each other and then hitting, and then as soon as you hit, you stop. I mean, if you're going to be out about the violence, why not hit and just keep hitting? I mean, the whole thing doesn't, it just didn't make any, like, I don't even understand the purpose. The person's hitting, because you're like, oh, happy, rah, 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 they finally hit, and then as soon as they hit, you stop. Like, kind of, relatively, they run or whatever, but it's just the whole thing, it just seems mindless to me. I don't relate to that at all. Plus, my mind thinks kind of feminine too, so how I like things is different. But it was like first super hard. When I first found out, I lost shame. I was a Christian when I first found out. I was 21 when I first found out, which is sad to find out as an adult. Oh, by the way, because I went to the doctor thinking something else totally different. I'm not going to talk about it, but anyways, it like you said, these issues have to be talked about. The same thing like really makes me mad every time it says don't talk about feminism. Every time I say that, I want to talk about it 10 times harder. If they say they're going to leave, then leave. They say, well, tens of thousands will leave, then you all leave. If you think that I do my stuff to make you happy, you have another thing coming. You don't even remember that I'm an anarchist and I have no masters. So I don't even know what you're talking about. And as far as people being equal, they all are to me. So I, once again, don't know what you're talking about. And it really.
Well, I appreciate you being one of the many people who are vocal, and you're very kind. And, when you set up your table, people can come talk to you, and you're very non-confrontational with them.
Exactly. I even give candy. Well, why am I even caring at all? Well, because humans have such value. How could I not care? How could I not care? To me, it's not even like, well, why would you care? How do you not care? How do you, you must not be assessing the world accurately. You must not. This is what there's between. Like you say, people, I realized, I have this meme that I wrote that it says that I realized that no one's a friend, but then I realized that I need to be a friend. Nobody ever cared. I realized I need to start caring. I realized that no one seems to act like anybody matters but themselves. So I realized that I need to start making other people matter in my life at all the time. I do it on Facebook, and there's plenty of people that I even have that I almost counsel. I talk, even on private, simply because I care. I want to help as much people as possible, the world, but the reason is the human value. I get it. Such value. It's like I tell people, if you have a $300 car, right, and you're going to lend it to me, my opinion of that car, because I know the value, it's going to be low. I'm not really going to respect it. I'm not going to break it. But if it's a $300,000 car and you lend it to me, the behavior of lending me a car and the friendship that you would do that, nothing changed. But the value changed. Us not knowing value means that we inappropriately assess value that's not there, and we devalue things that we should. Anyone who looks at humans and doesn't say, wow, that is a valuable person, is not really understanding the truth of humans. That's why people think I do homeless stuff, right? I go help the homeless, and I've written stuff about it. It's not because I'm a homeless advocate. I'm a humanist or whatever. I care. I care so much. I don't see a distinction between that person doesn't have a job. That's a human. Just like imagine if there was a natural disaster, right? in Portland, they don't ask everybody, what did you make in his income before the disaster? Because I need to find out if you can pay for this blanket I'm going to give you. Because if you can't pay, I won't be able to. The fact of someone even saying they would do that would make the moral disgust come up in us, and it should. But why do we limit that moral disgust to only natural catastrophes or some man-made catastrophe? Why do we only do it at the most desperate of times? If it's that valuable, to me, it would be more universal than that. So humans are worth saving when somebody's almost killing them. But okay, here's someone homeless. He's almost dying. Should we care? How about this female's homeless, being raped? How about the fact that this female cannot enter a homeless shelter because they don't want sex, and so they only take men? Yeah, I know. I've heard of this. I talk to homeless people, so I know. And they get abused and raped. And they have mental illness. And you know what's wrong? Mental illness gets worse the more things that happen. Then you get PTSD on top of your mental illness, and so we have to care. And I realize that life is just too short not to be kind. If I really look at that life, I told my mom this. She's a religious person, and I really convicted her bad. And I didn't even attack her God. I just did her morality. I said, Mom, if right now, and you know I'm an atheist, right now, if I was going to die, the second after the last words you just said, would you make that word a hate word? Would you tell me about your God, or would you tell me you love me? If it was the last word you can do, what is the thing that you would make sure I had to have? Would it be loving me or telling me about your God? Because once you tell me that, then I'll know what your morality is. Because it shouldn't even be a contest. It should be me. And she goes, well, yes, and I would want it to be other people. But it makes me think that I need to be that way when I talk to religious people. For me, that's how how can you be able to control yourself? I just keep seeing a human. I look at that poor human suffering under delusion. That poor human that was indoctrinated into that delusion. Most people didn't go wake up one day and go, you know what? I think I want to chastise my life, ruin everything I own, in a sense, feel like I'm a slave to a God that doesn't exist. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I mean, people usually are indoctrinated, and this is a real bad thing for me. I really hate it. No child to me under 7 should ever, to me, be introduced to religion. Under 7, mentally, they magically think as a way of processing the world, almost. So that's not even fair. I mean, it's like taking someone that has a mental handicap and then saying to them, I'm going to have a business you need to come check out, and what it is, it's really good. Now, this plot of land has nothing on it and never will, and it used to be a nuclear test site, but in 1,000 years, you're going to own this land. 1,000 years from now, it's going to be worth something. You can hand it to your children's children. I mean, total nonsense.
Well, I think it's interesting that you pointed out 7, because I had it all down at 7. I had a boy from school walk me home. Yeah. And I knew what church everyone went to. He was Catholic, I was Lutheran. I came home at the age of 7, sat down after dinner at the table with my dad and asked him if it was okay if a Lutheran married a Catholic. I had it down at the age of 7.
I'm not saying that every single child. I'm just saying, as a general rule, until... No,
I know, but I was totally indoctrinated by the time I was 7. I was so indoctrinated.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I was focusing on whether I, as a Lutheran, could marry. I mean, the fact that I was thinking about getting married at 7, that's an indoctrination of my role.
Totally. That's a sexual indoctrination. I totally agree.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Well, because first off, it's also, in a sense, to me, a whole bunch of things. You can unpack it, because it also means you're heterosexual. If you're looking to marry, in their sense, I'm not saying that marriage has to be heterosexual. I'm just saying I know religious people that. Yeah.
There was the role of the woman, what my goals in life were.
Yeah, exactly.
More at 7 about religion. It was the whole package.
Oh yeah.
Damien, I'm going to have to go.
No problem.
But it was great talking to you, and I think we've read a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
And if you find that reference you were talking about the woman being valued in the law.
Oh, 4,000 years ago? Yeah, I can go find that.
Yes, because I'd like to kind of include that in my presentations.
Sure. In fact, have you seen my video on sexism and religion?
I'm going to watch it.
Oh, I'll give you my, trust me. You're going to watch that and go, wow. Yeah.
Send me the link.
I will. All right.
Okay. Hey, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
I value you.
I value you too, Damien.
Thank you.
We're all in it together.
It has to be. We don't have a choice. There's nothing else going to come save us.
Take care.
All right.